It's 9:01. Time to call the meeting to order. Invocation will be by our own Jim Davis, and the Pledge of Allegiance will be by Commissioner Thomas Lowther.
Almighty God, we praise your holy name this morning and acknowledge your sovereignty in all the universe. We pray your presence on the meeting this morning. Grant our leaders wisdom as they consider the debate of the day. We pray that your will would be done in your precious name. Amen.
Amen.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Like we both joined it.
Y'all were doing this in that time.
We were.
Of course, when is Art and I ever out of step with each other, right?
That's right.
There are no additions or deletions to the agenda. There are no proclamations. There are no minutes to be approved.
Oh,
Goodness, let's go home.
easy day.
Under the consent agenda, do we have any item?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to pull item H for
H.
discussion, if I could. H. Is in
Any
here.
others?
Yes, I'd like to pull,
KLM. Any others?
Move approval as amended.
Motion to approve the consent agenda as amended. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, item H,
Item H.
81, which is an amendment to license with Pinnacle Towers Global Signal SWDD Convenience Center property at 901 First Place Southwest.
I think basically what I wanted to ask staff, and I believe this is probably the property, if I'm not mistaken, Commissioner Davis, we were looking at a bike, we tried to put a bike path or a bike track or what have you out there for recreation. I noticed that, I guess this is an update or an amendment to the previous lease, and it actually, I guess, states that it can be subleased. Now, are we still putting a vortex unit out there also for the main relief canal?
Yes, we checked with the stormwater. This is an existing lease.
Right.
The lease, the tower's already up. This is just them adding more equipment to it and us getting more money. The lease, I think, is for another 10 years at least. And we checked also with the stormwater. It's going to be very close to that parcel where we're putting the vortex unit. We may have to put some pilings around it, but it's there anyway, and we'd have to deal with it. This is additional revenue to the county. That's all that this means, is more money for us every month.
I guess that's probably what I'm asking, Joe, is to make sure that it doesn't get in the way of the vortex unit. I mean, if it's a lease that's almost up and we're getting ready to renew it, are we in a position of, do we need that area, do we need that property to put this vortex unit in and this go away, or?
Well, we ran this by our stormwater engineers because it was on the same site, and they said they could accommodate
They
it.
can do that, but they are scaling down the size. It's not 600 by 600. They're scaling it down.
Yes.
I couldn't find the exact,
Mr. Frame, Madam Attorney?
Exhibit 1, I couldn't find the exact size of what they're scaling it down to.
That is correct. They are actually shrinking down. It'll go down to almost 3 acres as opposed to what it is right now. Plus, the 3 guys that run out from the tower, there'll be easements for that, and it's always been a non-exclusive easement. So in terms of the lease, so that we could always utilize area as long as we didn't conflict with each other. So I think overall, this is an improvement to our ability to use that land, plus it increases our ability to get additional revenue. If we didn't do this, the tower is going to remain there for some time with the existing boundaries as it is now. So I think actually this gives us a better option, particularly with the planned vortex there. And we did contact Mr. McCauley, and he's indicated that he can work with that.
And this gives us an opportunity, Tom, to sublease? Is that correct?
Right. We if there's additional, we get additional revenue. Plus, they've paid an additional $10,000 to have the ability to do that also.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Frame. Marion, did you have a comment? No? Okay. We have a action on this.
I'll make a motion to approve it.
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
Moved and seconded to approve item 7H. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And Gary, I think you had Emma.
Yes. I just couple.
Restoration of Obasa Beach Park.
Yeah, a couple of questions on that. I see that we've got a continuing contract with Donadio and Associates, but we've got, you know, to me, we're putting in 7 buildings up there, two restroom structures, 3 pavilions, and 2 shower structures. And I know to build anything, we need a stamp of an architect, but $50,750. I don't know if that's high or not, but you know, from a lay point of view, it seems high for. I mean, not a lot of design goes into bathrooms and showers and pavilions.
Do they handle the permitting too? I'm like you, I don't
I don't know.
know.
I wanted to ask you.
I'll let Jim handle this item, but it's a little more complicated. So on the beach, it's going to require pilings, going through all the regulatory agencies because it's so close to the beach, and we're relocating. We have to check with all the sea turtle nesting requirements. It's not as simple as it seems.
Well, this would be on the other side of the berm or the
Bluff.
yeah, the
Yeah.
what do you call it? Yeah,
Bluff.
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 So, what would that have to do with sea turtles?
Everything.
Well, everything, anything on the beach, anything
Even
that,
on the other side of the sand dune?
yes.
Mr.
Beach
Davis?
is
That's
the
right.
beach.
Mr. Davis, do you have some comments?
Yes, Jim Davis, Public Works Director. As Joe said, the location of the new restrooms, even though it's behind the bluff, is still in the velocity zone of the FEMA flood insurance rate maps, which means all the buildings have to be designed with storm surge taken into consideration. And the lowest horizontal members have to be strong enough to hold the building up in case there is a storm surge. In addition, the site lighting has to be sensitive to the sea turtle nesting, so it's more of a sophisticated lighting design. If you also recall, in the agenda item, it includes landscaping, irrigation. There is a water and sewer lift station that needs to be added, but there's going to be an engineering contract to come with the architectural contract later with Carter and Associates. I'm sorry, with Coastal Tech. Coastal Tech will actually be doing the permitting through the Florida DEP, but the architect and the engineer are going to have to work hand in hand to get these permits because the whole project is pretty much seaward of the coastal control line, and it's more complicated.
We're going to have an additional cost with the engineering.
Yes, sir.
Also, and then the,
Yeah.
okay, and so we're looking somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 or something before we turn a spoonful of dirt.
Right.
And you're comfortable that this is a good price?
Quite frankly, I'd like to see all the fees down a little bit, but no matter what consultants we're using these days, their fees are increasing.
Did we get insurance money for this, Joe, from?
Yes, we did get insurance. I'm not sure, it won't cover the whole project because number one, the buildings were older. We're doing we're doing a more sophisticated buildings than we did in the past. The requirements are more, and we were only at the historical cost of the facility.
Right.
So I think we only got like I might be incorrect, but I think we only got like $180,000 for our old facilities.
Yeah. Any further questions on this item? Have a
Probably the
motion?
construction will be less money than the permitting and the,
No, we're estimating
green.
construction to be over $800,000 to replace these buildings.
okay.
We're building a whole new park.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 8. Item number 8, constitutional officers and governmental agencies. Kay Clem, Indian River County Supervisor of Elections, poll worker, recruitment, and training.
Move approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Public hearings. Board consideration to approve purchase of the Russell Grove River Buffer site under the County Environmental Lands Program. Mr. DeBellis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Roland DeBlois, Chief of Environmental Planning. This is a public hearing with respect to Commission consideration of purchase of a property under the county's Environmental Lands Program. This particular property referred to as the Russell Grove River Buffer Land Acquisition Committee site. This is a property that's within the overall St. Sebastian River Greenway, which in the past few months the Commission has officially adopted as a formal greenway in a plan. This overhead shows the location. It's west of Roseland Road, over near the youth camp, south of the Boy Scout Camp Oklawaha. To the west on the other side of the river is the 22,000-acre St. Sebastian River Preserve State Park. Subject property is a grove for the most part. It's a approximately 46.5 acre property. This overhead shows the main grove. There's also a peninsula of natural area that extends out to the river. The overall property has about 1,500 feet of frontage along the St. Sebastian River. It also includes a small island within the river that you see there along the west boundary, kind of centrally located. As I indicated, one of the main values of this property, as reviewed by LAC, is its river frontage. And that came into play in the appraisals of the property with 1,500 feet of river frontage. It's one of the few properties left on the river that's of a size that's with an opportunity to develop a subdivision. The subject property does have essentially a future land use designation of 1 unit per acre. It's currently zoned A1, 1 unit per 5 acre, but it was appraised on the assumption it could go to 1 unit per acre. These are just a few slides showing the different parts of the property. We did submit this for a Florida Communities Trust grant award, and that grant was awarded for 45% funding, so that's an active grant we have. This is the conceptual plan. When the county applies for a Florida Communities Trust grant, they want an upfront concept of what could be some of the uses in restoration. This is just a concept. It's subject to change. But the basic concept is passive recreational access along the riverfront with possibly a fishing pier and a walking trail. A lot of the grove, what's proposed is restoration over time to a natural area. Conceptually, there's a concept here of a multi-purpose passive recreational field that could be just established for whatever use. And another concept here that would need to be explored is a potential for a stormwater improvement pond that could be an amenity to the site but also improve stormwater management. There is a ditch that runs along the south edge of the property to the river. In summary, this is about a 46.5 acre property, as I indicated, 1,500 linear feet of shoreline. The negotiated purchase price is $4.8 million, which represents 80% of the approved appraised value from 2 appraisals the county obtained. Translates to about $103,000 an acre. Since it's 80% of the county's approved appraised value, in part of the negotiations, characterize this as a bargain sale, which is reflected in the contract, which would allow the owner or seller to apply for some tax reliefs under certain provisions. So we do feel that this is a good negotiated purchase. If you consider the bond, the grant funding from the state that we've had awarded, the approximate expenditure of the county's bond funds is just over 2.6 million. Again, the conceptual plan is passive recreational improvements and restoration of the grove over time to a native plant community. This did go before the Land Acquisition Advisory Committee, and they unanimously supported the purchase and recommended that the county proceed under the current contract. And with that, staff is also recommending, concurring with LAC, that the county proceed under the contract and move towards closing of this property.
And any questions of staff?
I do have one.
Go ahead.
Is that an active grove?
I believe it, yes.
Well, what about the crop for this coming year?
I will work with the owner to
Will we receive the proceeds from the crop if we own it?
Good question.
That would be something that the county could look into if they
Well, if
want
we
to
own
do
it.
that.
It's gonna, might be a nice thing to have.
That's a good point, and we'll look into that as part of the closing due diligence.
Do we have some citrus experience?
Any further questions of staff? All right, I'll open the public hearing. Anyone from the audience wish to be heard?
No, that's good.
No one?
Dr. Cox.
There we go. Dr. Cox.
Question? Knock off the price of the sale.
Thank you, Commissioners. David Cox, Periwinkle Drive, Summer Place. As you can see, we have actually 3 public hearings that relate to parcels along the St. Sebastian River, south of Prong, this morning. And I think these are a historic opportunity for the county to realize the Greenway plan. And I do want to encourage you to move ahead on these acquisitions. When I saw this, I think it was only about a year and a half ago, I saw a site plan for a subdivision on these 46 acres, and the plan that Roland just showed looks a lot better to me. I'll thank you very much for your support.
Thank you, Dr. Cox. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Dan?
Good morning. Tim Glover, 9660 Estuary Way, Sebastian. I'm also here representing the Friends of St. Sebastian River. Excuse me. And some of the greatest threats to the river is development along the river, which produces additional stormwater runoff and pollution and also loss of habitat. So as a result of that, we would support and encourage you to purchase this property. And it also, as Dr. Koss pointed out, it fits in pretty well with the Greenway plan, which I know you're familiar with. So I would encourage the county to purchase this property. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? I might add that I've been on that property as a member of the LAC committee on a kayak, and it's really dramatic. I think the elevation must be 15 feet higher than the river right there, and it's almost like a real sharp drop-off. But it's a beautiful piece of property. Any other comments? I'll close the public hearing. I'd be happy to second it myself.
Discussion.
For discussion.
Just along the same lines, I've had the opportunity to be on this property. In fact, before the Russells bought it, they bought it from my uncle, and I had the opportunity to work it as a working grove. But I'm certainly glad to see that if it can't stay in the grove, that it stays in conservation.
Bet you wish you still owned it.
Absolutely. It was a wise purchase, let's put it that way, for the Russell family, but more importantly, I think it's just as wise of a purchase for the county.
Well, that answers Sanders' question. Then we got somebody to pick the fruit.
No, it's not picking, it's the selling and marketing, Art. The picking is nothing.
Can't get it there without picking it.
Any further comments? I assume you're ready to vote. All in favor of this motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Very good. Public items number 2, board reconsideration of the Ryle parcel, environmental land purchase due to acreage adjustment as determined by boundary survey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a purchase under the Environmental Lands Program that actually has already come before the Commission at a public hearing back in February, on February 21st. The reason we're bringing it back is part of the due diligence that the county conducts after the option contract is approved to move towards closing. We do have a standard procedure where we do certain due diligence tasks just to verify what was assumed in the appraisal and in the purchase, just to assess and verify all conditions. And under that process, among other things, county obtains a boundary survey. This particular property, again, as was previously mentioned, is also in the Greenway. It's just north of County Road 510, 7500 block. This is another depiction of it. It's the northernmost of 3 ownerships in one of our particular LAC committee sites. It's the northernmost piece. When this was moved forward and was appraised and identified, it was assumed to be 10.13 acres. That was just based on estimates at the time. We typically rely on property appraiser records, and that was the acreage in the property appraiser records. That's the appraised that was the acreage assumption when the county obtained its appraisals. Here's another depiction of the property. Again, this depiction is based on the estimates at the time of the negotiated purchase. The red rectangle you see here represents the approximate 10 acres. Through the property is the creek component towards the southern reaches of the St. Sebastian River. Although this is a small copy, this will give you an idea of, we did obtain a boundary survey. The subject property is, as determined by survey, it is outlined in red. Here's a blow-up. Compared to what was estimated at the time of the appraisal and negotiated purchase price, you see that blue piece there. That's really the piece that was determined not to be part of the property. It's in fact a 75-foot wide swath of a total 150-foot wide Sebastian River Water Control District right-of-way. So that wasn't picked up under the early negotiations, but was picked up under the due diligence and boundary survey. That area is about 2.4 acres, so that represents essentially about a 24% reduction in acreage that was assumed when the option was negotiated. So we went essentially from 10.13 acres to 7.73 acres. A lot of the lines you see on the property, there's been some shifting of water control district rights-of-way. What this shows is both the historic rights-of-way as well as the current. So while it does show in the survey what appears to be some significant right-of-way through the property, that's actually historic right-of-way that's been shifted out. So just for reference. Just another viewpoint of, again, what the change is. Again, you look at what estimates the 10 acres, and the blue represents what's now been taken out. It's actually, physically, if you go out there, what you're going to see is essentially a grass area that has been mowed and maintained as part of the access to the canal to the west. But again, it's been determined not to be part of the Ryle parcel that's being purchased. And if you look at the, again, the creek alignment is still wholly on the property that the county would be buying. When this issue came up through the due diligence and the boundary survey, staff went through a process of looking at the values and prorating the values based on purely the per acre value times the acreage adjustment. And we looked at three things. We looked at the negotiated purchase price, the approved appraised value, and the average of the two appraised values from a standpoint of what would happen if you just carried it through on a per acre value estimate. The negotiated purchase price in this case was $1.15 million, which translates to $113,500 or so dollars. If you carry that out to the per acre value, just prorated estimate, that would bring, if you just carried out the math, it brings it down to about $877,000. If you go by the approved appraised value, what the approved appraised value is on the procedures is when the county gets two appraisals, it's the higher of the two appraisals, assuming they're within 20% of each other. In this case, they were. So the unadjusted approved appraised value was $1.42 million. If you carry that out to the prorated per acre value, it goes to $1.083 million. Finally, if you look at the average of the two, the average was 1.365 unadjusted, goes to 1.04. So we went through this process. Let me just point out that the prorated value, while it's a way of estimating an adjustment, it's not, you can't bank on it as the adjusted appraised value. We are working with the appraisers that did the original appraisals to come up with an adjusted appraisal. We did not have an extension to the option enough time to get those full numbers before the board's consideration, so we're working with the prorated values for reference. I do want to point out that Mr. Chuck Garris, attorney for Ms. Ryle, who's here, did coordinate with staff when this issue came up. Ms. Ryle, who unfortunately did pass away this past Friday, was willing to extend the option contract, which has been extended. when this first came up, they were not amenable to an adjustment in the original negotiated purchase price. When this did go to the Land Acquisition Committee last Wednesday, there's discussions about the values, and in the end, the committee, given all circumstances at the time, that they voted to recommend that the county just proceed with the current negotiated purchase price, despite the change in acreage. A couple of things that the committee discussed on their 12-to-1 vote was essentially the public value, or the physical value of the property really isn't diminished, because the piece that's left out by the boundary survey is essentially what was thought to be an easement is now a right-of-way, but the use was essentially the same. So the committee looked at that. They looked at the public benefit of the purchase. It's kind of a key parcel within the overall greenway, given its location, kind of a connector piece. So given all factors, they voted 12-to-1 to recommend that the board just acknowledge the discrepancy, but to proceed with the purchase. Because it was originally purchased as an 81% value of the appraised value, when it did the proration, under the prorated estimate, it becomes, the current price becomes 106% of the appraised value versus what was 81%. So there was some flexibility within the appraised value to do some adjustment. When staff went to the LAC last Wednesday, and as we wrote this staff report for today, we were taking the position that it would be appropriate to adjust the offer to the 100% of the prorated appraised value, which would bring it down to the 1.83. We felt that was appropriate. However, there's been a change in circumstance in that Ms. Ryle has passed away since last Wednesday. As far as the recommendations, again, staff recommended just to proceed with the negotiated purchase price. Today, staff's revising its recommendation due to the circumstance that we would support, because of the key nature of the property, the fact that we're into a legal situation now where if we do not proceed with the contract, which is a legal contract, the opportunity to negotiate is not there. So it's either act on the contract or renegotiate a new contract. So based on the whole circumstance, staff recommending, we're concurring with LAC's recommendation, which is to proceed under the current negotiated purchase price, which again is 106%. So the estimated prorated value, the actual value has not been fully determined through the appraisers. One other point I want to make is if the county does vote to proceed, the commission with this, it does require a supermajority vote due to the adjustment. We are talking about a price that is in all likelihood above the average of the two appraisals, so it would require a 4 out of 5 vote to proceed. With that, we're recommending that the board, acknowledging the issue, but still recommend that the county proceed with the closing at the current negotiated purchase price.
Thank you, Mr. Du Bois. Any questions of staff? Yeah.
Just so I understand this, if we did anything other than to approve, or therefore we would come back and counter, that would in effect, that would change the contract, and therefore it would make it so that what we have in place right now would be null and void until we've worked out an agreement with the other side. In this case, I'm not even really sure who the other side would be. It would be either her heirs or the personal representative of her estate upon that being determined, probably by probate or wherever it would go. I'm not sure if there's a will. And so I guess, so if we don't act now, then we wait until that gets established and then determine whether they accept our counter. Mm-hmm. And if they accept our counter or not, then we may have to go back through and get appraisals again. And if I'm looking at this correctly, it would appear to me it could go up by 6% between now and the direction that we need to go in order to purchase what I'd call a key piece of our Greenway plan. Is that why staff has really changed their recommendation?
Well, we have it under contract. We have an opportunity to move forward with the contract. If we don't move forward with it, it's unknown whether we'll be able to negotiate a new contract, what the price would be. I mean, initial indications from the appraisers is there's been recent comparables in the area, the price actually has increased. There's various factors. We have it in hand. We think it's an important property to move forward with acquisition. Due to the change in circumstances, there's less of an opportunity to timely negotiate a new contract. So that was the reason for our amendment to our recommendation.
Any other questions?
I've got a question. Roland, and I get what we're looking at, I guess, with what staff is recommending. We're taking the portion, we're looking at $140,000 an acre. Is that correct? I think it's the middle section that we have on page 227.
Right, we're actually going above, a little bit beyond that.
So we're gonna
We're
look at more
maintaining, under this new recommendation, yeah, if we were offering the prorated appraised value, which would have been 1.083, if you kind of look at, that would be at 140 per acre. But at this point, we've adjusted to the current negotiated purchase price, which is actually slightly more than that.
The previous property, we just paid $103,000 per acre, correct?
There is a slight difference in circumstance. This property is within the urban service area.
Okay.
It was assumed it could go to 3 units per acre.
Right.
The other piece was 1 unit per acre. It's a little bit different.
I guess my final question would be if and I know Mr. Garris is here, with Mrs. Ryle passed away, and I imagine if there's a trust that's been set up, then this can continue to move forward as opposed to going to a judge if a trust isn't set up? Do we know? Because if there's not a trust set up, I think you're going to end up going into the probate anyway.
We can't hear you from back there. Come to the mic, please, sir.
Well, I think I can answer. I'm the attorney.
You're the attorney?
Yeah.
What would you like to?
Answer now.
Yeah.
I was going to wait till the public hearing, but you can go now. It's fine.
Good morning. As Roland said, I am Chuck Garris. I am representing Gussie Ryle and now her estate. This will have to go through probate because it's her homestead, but we would be able to close within 90 days. Previously, the way the contract read, Ms. Ryle had the opportunity to stay in the home for a year.
Right.
So that portion of it would obviously be terminated. But so we would be able to close in 90 days if the board accepts the county staff recommendation. The other thing, though, just for point of clarification, we're talking about per acreage, but this is an improved property with a home on it, and that is not being taken into account in those calculations. And there's some significant issues with the way the appraisal was done because the home was improved subsequent to the hurricanes. So there is a considerable additional value to the county in acquiring this property because you have a home on there that can be the gateway to the green belt, which I think adds significant value to the overall project.
Thank you, Mr. Garris. Any questions of Mr. Garris?
Not of Mr. Garrison.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Yes, Sandra.
But of Roland. An observation of the process, and by the time the LAC committee received this information that it wasn't really 10 acres, it was less, and the momentum was so strong. And by the time we received this, the momentum is very strong. And this is an unusual situation because of the circumstances this last weekend. But for a future benefit, I think that when we start paying well over $100,000 an acre for anything, we should do due diligence and make the extra effort to find out exactly what we're buying. Did she pay tax on this right of way?
Comment on that.
Yeah.
Because it's very upsetting to me as to the way this process was handled by Mr. Hardy. We explained to Mr. Hardy that
Who is Mr. Hardy?
Mr. Hardy was the attorney that you all hired to negotiate this. And it was a very difficult process. And so we explained to Mr. Hardy this property did not consist of 10 acres, and he insisted that it did, that he refused to listen to us. The negotiated price was our negotiated price because Ms. Ryle had an offer on the table for more than what the county is paying, with the understanding of what the size of the property was. We knew, I've handled that area property for 30 years as an attorney, and so I knew where the drainage district's right-of-ways were. And we explained to Mr. Hardy that I've been doing this for 30 years and that this was right-of-way property and was not an easement, that these had all been renegotiated 25, 30 years ago. So it was upsetting to us to have this issue be raised after the survey, because we had told him up front. I wasn't sure if it was 7.9 acres or 7.5 acres or 7.8 acres, and we made that evident also. So this was, and it's not staff. Staff relied on counsel, and it's not county attorneys, because since they've been involved, the process has run much more smoothly. I have nothing but commendation to the county staff and attorney's office. This was outside counsel that you hired that caused most of this problem.
Well, that's a good clarification, then.
Oh, let me clarify his clarification.
Let's get down to the bottom of this.
Mr. Hardy and the appraiser get their information from county staff.
Yes.
And he understands and he talks to the owner representative, but ultimately he works for the county.
Yes.
Or he did it, through this process, and so ultimately he takes direction from county staff. County staff review this matter like we typically do. It's unusual to get the estimated acreage changed so much through the boundary survey. This is fairly unusual. It's not unusual to have some acreage adjustment. As a matter of fact, it's written right into the contract here that it's subject to adjustment through the survey. This was just an unusual circumstance in that, again, the property appraisers just didn't pick up on that adjustment with the right-of-way. We could double check it a little better. These days we have GIS opportunities to do double checks. We didn't do that in this case. We could. So, that's partly the county's staff's, responsibility. In any event, though, a part of the due diligence, we still feel that it's not appropriate to county to do full due diligence before the contract's negotiated, but afterwards, there's other issues beyond just the expense of something in case we don't get the negotiation, but it's also a time issue. So, it's just one of these, what I consider an unusual circumstance that led to the discrepancy.
And I do agree, it's an unusual circumstance, and I do appreciate your clarifying this. And but like I say, anytime we pay well over $100,000 and some an acre, it's premium property, and we need to double check. Thank you very much.
Part of Sandra's question was whether they've been paying taxes on the whole 10 acres. Was that how it was listed under the property appraiser's records? Mr. Garris looks like he has an answer.
Well, Mr. Dolte's records did indicate it was around 10 acres, but because it was zoned agricultural and it was homesteaded, the per acreage cost for Ms. Ryle was minimal.
But still, there was a per acreage cost.
Yeah, but it never raised to the level of actually.
The question though was she paying?
I presume she was. I didn't go back and calculate, but it was very minimal because it'd been there. She'd been homesteaded since the beginning.
But I don't want anybody to think agriculture doesn't pay pay.
Let me just say another thing.
No matter how minimal.
No, but you're talking less than $100 an acre in some of it.
Another point of reference was Ms. Ryle sold a bigger part of her total acreage in the not too distance past to the east, which is now being developed as a development within the city. And because of that, she didn't have her own, at least to my knowledge, she didn't have her own survey for us to reference up front since it was part of a bigger property, which was sold off in the past couple of years. Anyway, that's just another point.
Okay.
More question.
Any questions?
I got a question.
I've got one more. Roland, and I know basically we have in the backup, and in this case, the minutes weren't ready. I see LAC voted 12-1 not to recommend it. And usually with P&Z, the ones that don't recommend it,
Two recommended.
Two recommended, 12-1, two recommended with one dissenting. What was the one reason not to?
Well, at the time, again, there's been a change even since last Wednesday.
And who was that? In our backup P&Z list, who it was?
It was Janice Broda.
And she wasn't in favor of this?
No.
She supported staff's recommendation at the time, which was to offer the prorated appraised value versus sticking at the current. But again, circumstances have changed somewhat since then.
I'd just like to say, I listen to all this and it seems somewhat irrelevant. from the standpoint that we had a negotiated price, and there was right from the beginning a discrepancy in the acreage. Secondly, we're buying this property for a specific purpose. That purpose can still be met regardless of the 75-foot. And so, you know, I think that we should move ahead with this.
And the 75 feet is still there, and it's
Yeah, it's still
open,
government
cleared
owned.
land, and it's a buffer against whatever is
Yep.
going to happen west of that.
Well, I think we voted on it once already, haven't we? Yeah, so,
We did.
I agree.
All right. Are there any further questions? Otherwise, I'll open a public hearing. Anyone from the public wish to be heard on this? Mr. Paladin?
Joseph Paladin, 6450 Tropical Way, Vero Beach. I'm a friend of Gussie's, and I was out there with Dr. Cox and some other people when they represented an interest in purchasing this land for preservation or conservation. And that was her wish at that time, and that was her last wish, basically. She said if we could get close on a bid that she already had from a developer, that she would rather see it be put into conservation with the county than to see a bunch of damn houses built on it, to quote Gussie. I know that's what she wanted. And, you know, I paid $170,000 an acre for a 10-acre parcel, very similar to that, in a less desirable area, actually, because that's the way the price of land was, with no house on it.
That's not the 10 acres across from me.
No. Yeah, it is, as a matter of fact. Anyway, you know, my personal feeling on this is, of course, because I know Gussie and because I was there and I know this was her wish, and, you know, this would help take care of her sick brother who needs continuous care and what have you. And she wanted it sold for this negotiated price because she was upfront about it. And I think if it's worth $1,150,000 to develop, I think maybe it's worth $1,150,000 not to develop. So I'd ask you to look at this from the bottom of your heart and go along with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paladin. Yes. Jen Stripson?
My name is Jens Tripson, 2525 14th Street, Vero Beach. I'm representing Pelican Island Audubon Society today. I think with the land acquisition funds, we're all really wanting to get the most bang for our buck. And I think if we looked at the Sebastian River is really our only river in Indian River County, and the health of it partially determines the ultimate health of the Indian River Lagoon, that this is a win-win situation for us to buy this piece of property, and I would strongly urge all of you to vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jens. Anyone else from the audience? Yes? Mr. Grudens?
Ken Grudens, 931 Starflower Avenue, Sebastian, and I'm representing the Indian River Land Trust today. I was going to get up and talk a little bit in a minute about the next hearing. But I just want to mention that the Land Trust is, I think it's an understatement to say we're enthusiastic about the properties along this along this St. Sebastian River Greenway.
Hudson River?
I worked for the Hudson River Valley Greenway Communities Council for about 8 years, so it's kind of ingrained in my brain. But I met Gussie it was a workshop about widening the road on 510 in the fall of 2004. Actually, Tom Lau, our president at the time, and myself met her, and she started talking about wanting to preserve her land for conservation. So I went out and met with her, and she was very enthusiastic, very passionate about conserving that river and the otters that ran through it, and the family of otters, and the bobcats that ran through, and the cougars that she used to see when she had the larger grove. And I guess, and I don't really know the history on this, but I guess she tried to sell that other part of her property for conservation to the county. I'm not quite sure exactly what happened there because it predates my time here. But at the time, the county was sort of in between consultants, and they were looking to get their new consultant on board. So I kind of held Gussie's hand along the way and got her to the table and introduced her to Roland and really got that process started. And not so much to talk about the land trust role in that, except to say that at one point, and it was March of 2005, she called me up and she told me that she was waiting to hear and move this process forward, and I recognized that we were sort of in between consultants. But she said she had an offer on the table. I think she said it was like $1.2 million or pretty close to this price, actually. And that she was going to sell because she didn't want to wait. And I said, hold on. And I ran down and met with her and sort of, figuratively held her hand and convinced her, really argued with her and convinced her to hold out to sell her land for conservation, because the county, even though we're a larger bureaucratic, entity than maybe a land trust who can move quickly, they would come forward and they would, it's on the list and they would purchase the property. So I just wanted to share that and tell you that land trust is enthusiastic about this parcel. It's a key parcel along this greenway. And I just want to mention also that there is an FCT, a Florida Communities Trust application in for this and for the Shadowbrook property across Route 510. And Roland submitted that, and the land trust helped with some information putting that application together. And I think Roland can speak that he's fairly encouraged that we should be able to get a grant on that, because it was a very strong application in terms of the number of points that were submitted. And when Gussie found out that, and this is sort of on the next one, but when she found out that the land trust was able to secure the Shadowbrook property across 510, it really delighted her even more to know that it wasn't just her parcel that was going to get protected, but it was going to be other parcels on both sides of her. So I just wanted to speak for her thoughts along the way there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Garris?
I would just like to follow up with all of the nice comments the audience has made. Since I've represented Gussie for a great number of years, I can second all of the comments that have been made as far as her deep, abiding belief. And when I called her on Thursday to tell her that finally this matter was going to be brought before the county commissioner meeting here today, she was very excited. And of course, then she became ill and passed away on Friday. I really thought that she would be able to be here today, and this was going to be her crowning moment, because this has been a very long and tedious process for her. Of course, being ill made it even more so, but she really did want this to happen. And so I certainly hope and recommend, as a citizen of this community, that we can get it done for the community's sake. The other thing is putting my lawyer's hat back on. If it does not happen, the contract will terminate, and you will, if you were interested at all afterwards, have to negotiate. The problem in negotiating with fiduciaries is they must sell to the highest and best offer. They cannot negotiate below highest and best, whereas Gussie could, because she owned the property. And this contract has a provision in it that it is binding on the estate. And so if it is accepted, it will be binding on the estate. It's just a matter of going through the formalities of the probate court to clear it up.
Thank you for that information. Anyone else from the audience wish to be heard? Did I see someone on this side?
My name is Ralph Lindsay. Most of you know me. But anyway, Gussie worked with me for several years in the grow business. I don't think there's probably a woman in the state of Florida that has looked at any more rust mite than Miss Gussie did. I mean, she could go out and find them, and well, I'd drive by them, she'd stop and pick them up. But I know she talked to me about wanting us to go through the county instead of selling it to someone else to build houses on. She did not want to see houses go up on that property. She wanted to see the county have it, and she agreed to take a lower price because of that. So I think the Board of County Commissioners to take that consideration and see what they can do to help the family, and especially Don, her brother that's handicapped, that she wants to make sure he is taken care of for the rest of his life. And I know she did a good job of that. Sometimes she would take him with her when she was driving around checking the grows, and he was sitting in the vehicle all the time while she was out checking rust mite. So I know she did spend a lot of time taking care of him. So, and I've been here since 1946 myself, so I'm an old timer. Even Wesley Davis knows that. Have a good one now.
Thank you very much, sir. Any further comments from the audience? All right.
Move staff recommendation.
Staff's recommendation
in the negotiated price that we have with her.
Which
Currently,
is
option one.
1.150.
115.
Everyone understand the motion?
Yes, sir.
I assume you're ready to vote?
Yes,
All in favor of this motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Item number 9A3, board consideration to approve purchase of the Shadowbrook Estates, Inc. parcel of the South Prong Slough site under the County Environmental Lands Program.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This also is within the St. Sebastian River Greenway. It's actually just immediately south of the Ryle parcel on the other side of County Road 510. It's about just over 29 acres. Again, if you look at what we call our South Prong Slough project, it's the central piece. There's a blow up of the property. There's the creek portion of the Sebastian River does run through the property. It's about, staff estimates just over 6 acres. In the northeast corner is a historic house called the Stowe House, based on the original family. It's about a 1915 to 1920 circa house. The remainder of the property is old grove that's grown back. It does, as indicated, it does have that significant feature of the Sebastian Creek. We've seen pictures of some very large cypress trees in there. This is a picture of the house. When it was appraised for the purposes of this negotiated purchase contract, the highest and best use value really didn't factor in the value of this house. Essentially, it was a non-factor in the appraised value. But this property is 1 unit per 5 acres. It's agriculturally zoned. It's just outside the urban service area. The County Road 510 is the boundary of the urban service area. So this property, this 29 or so acre property, is basically valued on its 5 acre tract value. As far as just a summary, the negotiated purchase price in this case is $2.2 million. Let me say there were 3 appraisals obtained. One, the Indian River Land Trust, Mr. Grudens had indicated his involvement with Mr. Ryle's property. Indian River Land Trust was also involved with this property. They took the initiative to, in an effort to tie it up before the county got its appraisals. The trust got its own appraisal using an appraiser on the county's list, Phil Wagner. And they essentially had the property under contract. They negotiated a purchase price, which is this purchase price of $2.2 million. The county subsequently got its 2 appraisals, which is summarized in the staff report backup. The county's 2 appraisals were $1.9 million and $2 million, with an approved appraised value of $2 million. However, the property had already was under contract through the land trust. The concept at the beginning was that that option would be assigned to the county potentially. When we got our appraisals and through the process, we pretty much, it evolved such that the land trust contract expired and the county just negotiated its own. Due to the sequence of events, essentially the seller was willing to sell at the initial appraised value of the land trust, which is 2.2, so that's how the contract moved forward. So while this represents the appraised value of one of the 3 appraisals, the one that the trust got, it's actually 110% of the county's approved appraised value through its 2 appraisals it obtained. And because it's above the appraised value, actually above the average of the 2 appraised values, the county's procedures is such that a supermajority vote of the commission is required to move this forward. Now, these issues were discussed before LAC, and LAC did review the project. Again, it is an important part of the Greenway. In the end, the LAC did vote 16-0 to support the approved contract and recommend that the board move forward with the purchase. On the issue of management, let me just say first that, as Mr. Grudens had indicated, we did apply for a FCT grant under the current cycle for cost share funding through the state. This is combined with the RIO parcel. We applied for 45% funding. It is my opinion that this is a strong project, and in all likelihood, come September, we should know that if we get that funding. Another point I want to make is the property does have both environmental and historic characteristics, which is kind of a combination of objectives with the county's bond program. Although the appraisals from a highest and best use did not assign a value to the historic house, it does serve the county's objectives, which is to preserve historic resources. The concept here under management would be public access as part of the greenway. The house could be used as a restored visitors type center and office. The Indian River Land Trust has volunteered to be a managing presence on this property and also in the overall greenway, including the RIO, where they would have volunteers and staff to help manage the property, which county staff sees as a benefit to the county. So with that, staff is recommending that the commission approve the purchase option for exercise to proceed towards closing.
Thank you, Roland. Are there any questions of staff? I'll open the public hearing. Anyone in the public wish to be heard on this item? Dr. Cox.
David Cox again. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I strongly supported this acquisition in front of the LAC committee when it did come forward, and I have actually spent quite a bit of time in that swamp forest there, and it's exquisite. And I would welcome the opportunity to take any or all of you out there for a walk. I think you'll be surprised what lies just a handful of yards away from County Road 510. It's remarkable that it has survived, and I think is a testimony to the land management that has gone on all around it, that it's, despite decades of use, there is this little world preserved along the flowway of the South Prong, and I certainly hope that it's something that we can preserve for future generations of residents in the county to enjoy as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cox. Anyone else wish to be heard? Yes, Mr. Grudens. Be next.
Ken Grudens, 931 Starflower. Did I say the Land Trust was enthusiastic about this? We are very enthusiastic. We have some board members here today that came out to show their support. Dick Paul, Karen Abel, Kathleen Schulke, Carol Webb, and our staff member, Melanie Jones. I think that's everybody. The board has clearly made a commitment to helping in the management of this project, as Roland pointed out. And I wanted to discuss in detail a little bit more what that commitment is. In our 2006 budget, the Land Trust has committed $10,000, that's in this current year, for a personnel and or a consultant to assist in coordinating the planning and development of the conservation area. And then starting in 2007, the Land Trust expects to commit approximately $20,000 each year for management personnel and up to $2,500 to help purchase equipment or related management services for the property. And I would personally oversee the Land Trust involvement in the management activities that the Land Trust is involved with the county, and would remain in regular contact with the county staff during the development of this, what would be a very unique conservation area. All told, in just the first 2.5 years after a successful purchase, the Land Trust would be committing nearly $75,000 of staff time, goods, and services for starters. Management goals for the property include restoration of the native plant communities, and we would work very closely with the county on that as they've got a lot of experience in that. Development of educational structures, observation decks, boardwalks, and a greenway trail, potentially improvements to the historic house, and the startup of an ongoing educational programs. I've been talking with the Environmental Learning Center, and they are interested in running monthly programs on the property, and we hope to be able to develop an interpretive master plan in the coming months, late part of this year, if this were to be purchased. Roland didn't show any pictures of the large cypress, and we didn't do any formal dating of some of these trees, but it's estimated that some of the cypress trees on this property, not just one or two, but several, are upwards of 300, 400, maybe 500 years old. They were there when Spanish settlers were coming in, and we get the children out there to look at these. To me, this property is priceless. And I just wanted to explain to you that the Land Trust is committed, and I think that this area will be well used and greatly appreciated by all the development that's going on around it. We've got development going on the east side, the west side. You've got prospective plans for what would be Liberty Park project on the south side of 510, and more already approved developments on both sides. And I think that the Land Trust involvement will assist the county in making this Sebastian Creek Conservation Area one of the county's premier publicly accessible areas, and all the while helping the county to focus its limited resources on other existing conservation areas while that occurs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grudens. Yes, sir.
Fred Mensing, 7580 129th Street. When Gussie moved from the river out to her property, she took my girlfriend and I for a walk along the river there and across to this property. And I have not looked at it closely other than from the road. But having preserved everything upstream, we need to get all the way to the headwaters of the South Prong to preserve everything. I can remember, 20 years ago when the Sebastian River was a sewer because of the dairies and so forth discharging in the river. The river's coming back. If you don't get everything to the top, you can't totally control what goes down the river. And what is there is astronomical if you haven't been there. I mean, you think you're the first explorer, when you get up in parts of Gussie's land and this land on the other side of 510 there. Please buy it.
Thank you, sir. Any further comments from the audience? Mr. Tripson.
Jens Tripson, 2525 14th Street, Vero Beach. When the dairy was mentioned, Henry turned around and I think was going to make a smart comment because of my comment here a couple of weeks ago about being a dairyman. I'm sorry the dairy industry harmed the Sebastian River years ago, but that's been taken care of. This is really still in the win-win situation. It's a little bit more money, but the beauty of the piece and the fact that we're going to be really doing another major step in protecting the St. Sebastian River is really crucial, and I urge all of you to vote in favor of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Jens. Anyone else? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing.
Staff recommendation.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Somebody ready to vote? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
We've spent some money today.
We have spent some money. 3 beautiful properties.
Just as easy to save some property today, too.
Thank you.
We can't work together.
We can work together. See there? Thank you so much.
Did Wheeler hear that?
Wheeler heard that. Okay, public discussion items. Request to speak from Fred Mensing regarding golf carts in the Roseland area. Fred?
Gary been up there riding around Roseland in his golf cart?
Probably.
I would like to pass out the law
The law.
issue.
Involved, and they don't talk law.
Should we call the sheriff?
I have spoken to the sheriff about this.
About people driving golf carts?
Gary can probably get some
Prohibited.
You received, and it's in your packet, my letter of May 22nd. For years, Roseland has been kind of the stepchild of the county. We do things our way. We have a very honorable gentleman who, you're aware of the code enforcement issues that are already before the county. He has decided to attack the people who have golf carts, who use them in Roseland. The sheriff came out and has told us, because you have not enacted the necessary action, which is defined in the chapter 316212 to allow golf carts, that he cannot allow them. And the second chapter in there goes into low-speed vehicles. Golf carts are clearly defined in the state statute, and they are different than low-speed vehicles, which are like your John Deere Gator and your Cushman Truckster, but they are defined in the statutes. You have the ability to define areas where golf carts can be used. I have described a large area here, basically the entire Roseland community from 126th Street east to Route 1, with the exception of using Roseland Road because of the high traffic. There are other statutes that define the use of golf carts in mobile home parks, and some people consider the Rose 4 area a mobile home park, although it is mixed zoning. I met with Roy Raymond in his office and we discussed this. He's not going to come here and pound a drum and say yes. He would like to discuss it with the commission if you're going to move forward with it. He is concerned that, the door gets opened here and it's going to be, look at a lot of other areas, and there are a lot of people that are going to be upset. But the law is the law. You cannot run ATVs or golf carts or gators or any of these go-karts on the road system in Florida. And there are some exceptions that I have, brought forward here. And Mr. Collins, I'm sure, could go through the 300 chapter of the law book and come up with the fact you cannot ever use the four-wheel, three-wheel ATVs on the road unless you're a law enforcement agency. I mean, these things are covered, and I'm asking that you would look into legalizing the use of golf carts in the Roseland area. It requires some signs being put up and define the area and be considerate of the people who happen to live in the straight residential area. I cannot give you an honest, accurate count. I can tell you that on 129th Street at this time of year there are 7. Come winter there will be 12. I talked to Rodney at the transfer station. He thinks we probably have 20 because there are people that use golf carts to bring their garbage to the transfer station. We know that there are some on the east side of the railroad in the old Waregan subdivision. It's going to take a while to find out where they all are until they surface. I don't think it's fair that Mr. Carey ran his construction equipment between his lead plant and his plant in the city, which he is still doing, against the law, and we can't get away to get legal. And I'm asking put staff to work to try to do something in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mensing. Anyone want to follow up on this?
I'd just like to speak to the statutes that Mr. Mensing brought to your attention. The general rule under state law is that public roads, the operation of a golf cart on a public road is prohibited. The county can authorize or designate certain roads for golf carts, but under the definition of golf cart, it's not capable of exceeding speeds of 20 miles an hour, and it isn't allowed on any state roads. that have a posted speed of higher than 30. So there are some safety concerns about the speed of cars mixing with golf carts. Before the county could designate any public roads for the operation of golf carts, they have to first make a determination that the carts can safely travel on the road, considering factors such as speed, volume, the character of the traffic on the road. And once they do make that determination, we're required to post the roads indicating operation is allowed. So I think, excuse me, at a minimum, if you want to pursue this, you should probably have your staff look at the roads in the area that are being proposed for golf cart use and take a look at the volume of traffic, the posted speeds, and really know that you're not creating a safety hazard. Going back to the general prohibition against golf carts operating on public roads, make sure that if it is allowed, you've inquired into it sufficiently to know that it's a low volume, low speed road, that there wouldn't be conflicts that would result in safety problems.
Well, as far as the Roseland area, the subdivision of Roseland, I could see it would be a nice thing, but getting across Roseland Road I'd be afraid of that, very much afraid of that. And as soon as you allow it on one side, people want to go to the other side, and there's going to be a conflict. Any other feelings on this? Let it die?
Fred, I understand what you're saying, but today there's industrial area off of 130th, and today it may not be an issue, but as that area comes into what the future plans entail, it could be a safety issue. And in a mobile home community or manufactured housing community where you have very limited traffic and they use the golf cart not necessarily to run to a convenience center, but moreover to I would say to a clubhouse or a community pool, something along those lines, I could see how that'd be a little bit more appropriate. I see this as being more of an issue, more of a health, safety, and welfare issue later on down the road if we were to allow this to move forward.
You may. Gary?
The only thing I might recommend is that we give this to the sheriff's office. He's got a traffic unit, and they could come back with the pros and cons and maybe a recommendation from the standpoint of health, safety, welfare, and law enforcement.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do that.
My response to the safety issue is the issue wasn't even one that law enforcement was even looked at until a complaint was made by the Carey family to law enforcement, which is basically, was directed at me, but it has affected a whole lot of other people because of, we'll call it the Carey-Mensing War, which you're somewhat aware of what's going on. You've received various faxes in the last few days and so forth.
Are you a golf cart driver?
I am.
Oh, okay.
Do you play golf?
No. No, but it is a cheap way to go visit your neighbors.
Yeah.
At the price of gas and so forth.
That's true.
Thanks, Fred.
Okay, let's move on to, oh, by the way, let's, Joe, why don't you follow up with the sheriff and see what he thinks about it? Okay? That's,
All right, I'm gonna get a letter from the sheriff's office.
All right. B2, request to speak from Joseph Paladin regarding traffic study. Mr. Paladin.
Good afternoon, Joseph Paladin, the Chairman of the Growth Awareness Committee, and I'm speaking to you as the Chairman of the Growth Awareness Committee. I'm going to read part of this because I've got some bullet points that my committee has put together and kind of keep me in tow. First of all, I'm going to speak to you on the McMahon Associates regarding the county's road concurrency management system. The GAC committee was given copies of this a couple weeks ago at least, and we've read it over extensively and studied it and discussed it and had debates on it, and so we thought we understood what we were talking about. At this time, the conclusion is that our staff should be congratulated for a job well done. We believe they've done an outstanding job. The report, in our opinion, pointed out that on balance, we're doing a much better job of managing our concurrency system than other counties in the state. We feel that other counties are entertaining certain liberalizations that our county hasn't entertained. Our county's taken a rather conservative approach, and we'd like to support our county staff in maintaining the approach they've taken in the past as being conservative, and we don't think that we have to be more liberal like some of the other counties we don't want to be like. Reading over the report, we found several things that we didn't understand that our staff has been doing that is conservative, and we want to support them to continue in the method that they've worked in the past. Having said that, we have a couple recommendations that we'd like to recommend to staff publicly at this time. One of the things is that we all know that we're working on a new ordinance to take place as a pending ordinance. We would go ahead and support staff into bringing forth a new ordinance that would replace the pending ordinance, where it would be fair to everybody involved, including the small local developer as well as the big out-of-town developer. So we would support them on that and ask them that, to continue to work on that and bring that forward as soon as possible. Secondly, we support, it would be hard not to support gathering more information if we need it in certain areas. We're not against information. The Growth Awareness Committee is not against information. We would ask that the Growth Awareness Committee, myself, Bill Beardsley, Dr. Cox, along with a couple of people from the Indian River Neighborhood Association, Ralph King, Grant Withers, they're on the staff there. We would volunteer to come forward and take like 58th Avenue, a road that really hasn't been talked about too much as being in the capital plan, et cetera, where there's a lot of developing out there, and maybe take the information on our own time as volunteers, put it into a system, do the counts with the blessing of staff telling us, what these counts would be and how to go about it under my supervision, and maybe put together our own report on one road to see what the outcome would be as far as improvements, as far as what the counts are, as far as what concurrency is, and do that voluntarily with no cost to the county. And then maybe bringing that information forward, we could look at that and see how that works and get an idea of what we're talking about. That would be our suggestion, and we would volunteer to do that. And the people I mentioned are here today, and they would back me up on that and say that they would volunteer to work with me on that. Going a little further, I think that once again, the job that staff has done, and to conclude that, us being the only county in the whole state that's adopted Senate Bill 360 is amazing in itself. And if you're really going to realize how good of a job that we've done when the other counties have to start adopting it. We did it with very little pressure, actually, and gave up very little because we were already doing such a good job. But when you see other counties, what they have to go through to try and come into this, adopting the Senate Bill 360, it's going to make you appreciate the job that staff has done. So at this point, I just want to, once again, bring forth that we want to congratulate staff, we want to thank them, and we appreciate the job they've been doing for us. Thank you, and I welcome any questions.
Any questions, Mr. Paladin?
No, an observation, though. I do appreciate your time, energy, and effort in your group. And I don't know who wooed who, but now the staff and your group is all together. So that didn't happen when it's in the beginning, I think. So I applaud both of you.
Well, I won't say that Mr. Keating was ever wrong, but maybe his timing was just a little off. I was wrong a little bit.
Joe, I don't think you need sanction from the commission to do a committee to study something other than at the time we come back in front of the commission, and I assume staff would be coordinating somewhat with them with the things that may come up where there's a different point of view or something. But I think that having any citizens' input that works together like that, particularly with some of the people in this community and their expertise, is a positive to look at that between the consultant that we hired, that P&Z asked for, and also with our own staff. And I think the more heads you get together on that, the better project in it.
And I think we could bring back some information in layman's terms where we can all sit around and discuss it a little more openly and understand what we're basically talking about. Because until we broke a lot of this stuff down personally, I personally didn't realize a lot of things that staff was already doing. You know, and I do this this is my life practically, so this is what I do. And if I didn't understand some of it, I'm sure a lot of other people didn't understand some of it.
I just appreciate it's not all fluff, Joe. That's the key.
And you're going to monitor in the hot sun, 58th Avenue, personally?
Yeah, I'll be right out there with everybody else. We're going to do what we got to do. I didn't understand the fluff thing because I've never met the gentleman, so I don't know what to say about that.
I'm not going there, but I just made the comment.
I know.
I'm glad it's not all fluff. But I'm glad
Thank
you
you.
have someone running against you for county commissioner, not me.
But I can't be defeated.
You know, we had the guest editorial on Friday, and I just thought it was totally inappropriate of Mr. Christopher to make his remarks in the paper, and they're very one-sided, and he only went on one item. If you looked at our traffic study, the consultant recommended 13 things to be less restrictive and 5 to be more restrictive. And there were significant changes. I thought it was very inappropriate for Mr. Christopher to criticize my staff and myself like he did. He didn't let the process finish. And I was even more concerned when the Press Journal, which wrote an editorial that was not based on facts but fiction, and didn't take the time to check out anything, which is unusual. Well, it's not unusual for them, but and so I would just like to point out that, you know, if no one sat down with before the editorial was written with my staff to discuss or even look at the traffic study. So it's amazing that they could write such a one-sided editorial. And I just wish they'd base it on fact, not fiction.
You have to understand, these are opinions. Editorials are opinions by 1 or 2 people.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with fact.
And I would also agree, I don't know that, word picking, I don't know that inappropriate. I mean, people are entitled to their opinion. It may be you disagree with them or consider it inaccurate, but I think, you know, anybody's got a right to express their opinion on the opinion page. And so I don't know if you can apply appropriateness to the editorial page.
Well, I think the main thing is we were able to get together with a consultant and get together with planning and zoning and hash out a lot of things that were issues to them. And I think the whole key is working together. That's been my whole ploy.
Come a long ways in the last couple of years with working together. And
We have.
Yeah.
And it all isn't.
Well, except for us.
Well, we showed that today that we can work together.
Occasionally. All right.
Y'all finally fell in line.
Item 9C, moving right along. Public notice items. Kim, would you read these? These are public hearings that will be coming up in the future, and we're giving everyone a heads up.
Public hearings for June 13, 2006. Commander Groves requests to rezone plus or minus 247.67 acres located at the northwest corner of 82nd Avenue and 1st Street Southwest from A1 Agricultural District up to 1 unit per 5 acres to RS3 Single Family Residential District up to 3 units per acre. Premier Citrus owner Schulke, Biddle, and Stoddard LLC agent. This matter is quasi-judicial. Also on June 13th, William D. Bailey's request to rezone plus or minus .52 acres located at the southwest quadrant of the intersection of 45th Street and 45th Avenue from IG, General Industrial District, to IL, Limited Industrial District. William D. Bailey, owner, Shannon Cook, agent. This matter is quasi-judicial. Also on June 13th, LVS Vero LLC request for a small-scale land use amendment to change the land use designation for more or less 3.28 acres located approximately 475 feet north of State Road 60 and 690 feet west of 82nd Avenue from CI Commercial Industrial to M1 Medium Density Residential 1 up to 8 units per acre, and to rezone those 3.28 acres from CL Limited Commercial District to RM8 Multiple Family Residential District up to 8 units per acre. LVS Vero LLC owner, Schulke, Biddle, and Stoddard LLC agent. This matter is quasi-judicial. Also on June 13th, Indian River County School Board's request for abandonment of a portion of 14th Street lying between 16th Avenue and 20th Avenue. This matter is legislative.
Thank you, Ms. Masson. I think this is a good time to take a break that we're required to do every 90 minutes. We'll be back in 5 or 10 minutes. I'd like to call the meeting back to order, please. We are to item number 10, which is County Administrator's Matters. Have a presentation by Enterprise Geographic Information Systems Implementation Plan.
From Geographic Technologies Group, we have David Holstock here and Curtis Hinton, and they're going to give a presentation on how they propose us to move with their GIS system into the future, which I think is extremely important to this county. It's going to take a financial and a long-term commitment, but I think it's one of the most important things we're going to have to do.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Commissioners, my name is David Holstock. I'm CEO with Geographic Technologies Group. This is Kurt Hinton, who's president of Geographic Technologies Group. Today we're going to talk about something that's been ongoing for a while now. We've just completed a 3-year phase strategic implementation plan for the county. And you'll see from the outline we've been given approximately 10 minutes to cover a lot of territory. So with that in mind, I'll move forward, and we want to talk just a little bit about GIS, then talk about the strategic plan and the recommendations in the plan. We'll talk about some specific applications that have come out of a user needs assessment, and then we'll talk about the 3-year phased implementation and the costs associated with that. Well, let's talk about GIS in general. Just to give you a little history, actually, you know, 6 to 8 months ago we came into the county, we interviewed all the departments and asked them really what they needed with regards to mapping, GIS and related technology. And we started to gather all that information. In that process, we were educating some of the departments and talking about GIS, but one of the things about GIS, Geographic Information Systems, is a mapping tool. Anything that can be mapped, from greenways to fire hydrants to the incidents of crime to roadways to trees, everything that can be mapped is being mapped throughout the country and stored in what's called a geographic information system. That GIS has a relational database of information. So all of the departments have a wealth of information. And as you can see from the graphics here on the slideshow, all of the departments have a wealth of information that can be linked to the Earth's surface. If it can be linked to the Earth's surface, it essentially can be mapped and analysed spatially. So what our intention was to find out about the databases existing and how much of that information we could map to the Earth's surface and how much GIS was needed in each of the departments. As you can see from here, it's not only integrating data, it's integrating images, video and things like that. So GIS is an integrative tool, and it's proving to be extremely useful for all the departments in the county and counties, from towns, cities and counties across the US. It's being used extensively, and there's a massive amount of investment going into it. Let's talk a little bit then, given the time constraints, just a little bit about the strategic plan. The strategic plan, we've gone through a few iterations of the strategic plan, and Kurt, if you go to the next board, it'll just show you the process. We came in 7 months ago, we initiated a kick-off meeting, we introduced the technology, we performed a needs assessment, we interviewed all of the departments, and we gathered as much information as we could from all the departments. Essentially, we sat down with each department and said, what do you need with regards to GIS? And when I say GIS, I mean GPS, I mean AVL, I mean different but related technologies. At the end of the day, as you can see in step 9, we have given a final presentation to all the departments. We've had some consensus building, we've had some discussions about how GIS should be coordinated, how it should be managed, how it should be maintained, who should do what, and what types of software, what types of data should be created. At the end of the day, with the blessing of all of the departments and support from all of the departments, we were able to come up with a strategic plan that has costs associated with it. And the costs are all associated with database creation, hardware, software, people and training, etc. So you can see that we've completed that. And let's talk about a little bit about the applications and some of the applications that make sense to Indian River County, and this is just a few. Managing growth, and growth is an issue in the county, a population of about 112,000 and growing. We're looking at GIS to support growth and help manage the growth, and any mapping tool is going to do that. You can see from the county of Riverside in California, you can see that having a web tool to allow citizens to come in and access information about parcels, ownership of parcels, acreage of parcels, zoning of parcels, it really is there are potential savings. And this is one example in the top right-hand corner where you can see there's millions of dollars being saved because of these web portals. Citizens are now not coming into departments to ask for information. They're actually going online to get all this information. And I've seen the proceedings that have gone on before this presentation. I can see where GIS will benefit everybody from having a live presentation and a access and portal into all of this geographic information system information, as it were. You can see there's also some community-based planning support systems in the GIS world which we've recommended. But managing growth, it's proven to be very successful. I'll talk about infrastructure, from fire hydrants, from roads, from sidewalks, to any underground infrastructure. And I think the county has some big initiatives going on in the infrastructure world. But GIS is the tool to go to for mapping and managing all of the attributes and information about infrastructure, from not only remediation to pavements, but to managing the age and condition of all the underground infrastructure. So GIS is a natural fit for the major investment the county is making in the infrastructure. Property owner notification, another thing which is a common example of how once GIS is implemented, a 3 to 4 hour task, or traditionally a 3 to 4 hour task, can take about 5 minutes. And what I mean by that, given the parcel and the cadastral base, the GIS tools will allow us to produce mailing labels and notify people within minutes or a few hours worth of work. So there are some major savings and there's a return on investment. What we've tried to do throughout this strategic planning process over the last 6 months is keep our eye on the return on investment. It serves no purpose to say, well, let's do GIS. Let's recommend that the county do GIS for GIS sake. Well, if you look at the document, which is about 3 inches thick, we focused on the return on investment, why we should do it and what the return should be. Now, if you go to the next board, this is an example of where we've recommended something called reverse 911 or emergency notification, whereby I or anybody in the county or specific departments can actually identify a zone, an area within the county, and immediately telephone all those people that live within that zone and notify them in the case of an emergency. This is a very popular tool that has been applied throughout the United States, and we've recommended it for the county. It can be boil notices, it could be emergency notifications, it can be anything like that, but it's an immediate notification. It could be a lost child, it could be boil notifications, anything like that. So we've made recommendations about that. Another recommendation in terms of data sharing, and data sharing is what it's about. We're recommending that the county invest nearly $2 million in the investment in GIS, and therefore we want to share as much, or share responsibly, a lot of this information with the citizens and the public. One way is a kiosk, a touchscreen kiosk tool, where if a citizen doesn't have access to the web, they can come to a location at the county and through a touchscreen portal, as I call it, can access information about parcels, print off information about parcels. So aerial photography with all the layers of information on top of that is proving to be very useful, and it certainly will improve efficiency, improve productivity. Essentially, we're saving lives, time and money by implementing these tools at the departmental level. Public data sharing, again, I come back to that, those web portals we can cite. We have cited many examples whereby an organization or a private companies looking for land in certain areas. New York firm wanting to move down to Indian River County should have access to, we've recommended that we build a web portal where you can come in and look at available land, look at the economics of the area, and make some decisions as to whether this county is a viable alternative for the location of an industry. So as you can see, as I talk about GIS, you can see how it opens up from the departmental level to the true enterprise level to the global level, whereby people can come in and look at information about the county and look at suitable land. Post-disaster. Disaster mitigation, I live in North Carolina, so I've done an awful lot of work in preparedness, response, and recovery especially from hurricanes. But GIS for hazard mitigation and homeland security is proving to be once again a super tool for improving in that area. As you can see from these graphics, an example of that would be the National Flood Insurance Program. If you understand the NFIP and the community rating system, the application of GIS tools from mapping floodways, from mapping vulnerable areas, it certainly can save the county on insurance points using the community rating system. So the application of GIS to hazard mitigation is well documented, and it's one of those applications we've talked about in the document. Permits and business licensing. Anytime, we work with departments and we look at what software they're using, our tendency is to say, well, if that software has some kind of geographic location, i.e. being a name and address, we can map it to the Earth's surface. Once you see information on the Earth's surface in map form, you're starting to see the geography of the information. And when you see geography, you start to see opportunities to improve efficiency. And what we see with permits and building licenses is potential revenue loss, where there are fees for permits, where there are fees for business licenses. Once mapped, you can see certain holes and see opportunities where that didn't exist before. So again, we've documented in the plan that given a scenario where we can map this information that exists in the database, we could potentially generate revenue. Affordable housing, I think that was a request that came out of really interviews with the departments. Anytime you're building this cadastral base or building a database of information about the county, affordable housing is a byproduct of that, because we build information about housing in the county and then we start quantifying it in the GIS, and we were able to start mapping affordable housing and looking at affordable housing in relation to other important critical infrastructure, the relationship of affordable housing to employment generators, to the transportation infrastructure, to the daycare infrastructure. So all of that can be done and is recommended in the plan. Public safety issues, in terms of reducing response time for emergency response professionals. We've looked at that before. We've made recommendations about how GIS can, through modeling of GIS, can improve those response times. So once we start doing that and looking at travel times and response times to an incident, we're starting to flirt with saving lives, time and money. And as you can see from this, from spill mitigation to location of residents at risk. So anytime you're mapping information, you want to map the center line of roads, you want to map critical infrastructure and residents. So we're building a whole list of characteristics of Indian River County, and it all resides in the GIS. Public safety issues, this is just a hard copy map of the incidence of arson. So if we were talking about mapping out arsons, mapping crime incidents, and potentially changing certain beats and changing the way law enforcement operates, any time you invest in GIS, you're able to map the incidence of crime by certain time constraints, by certain characteristics. If you do that, then we start to change the way law enforcement look at the incidence of crime. And they certainly do change the way they operate, and by doing so, we can certainly improve operations.
Would that information be available to the public also?
Well, we have to be careful a little bit that, because I talk about this a lot, especially with Homeland Security. The commissioners, it's absolutely critical that some consensus is reached regarding how much information in the GIS we share with the public. To what extent we're going to share this with the public will be determined as we move forward with the GIS.
What we've seen on the crime side, a lot of times they'll just kind of aggregate by certain geographies instead of being, because of legal issues, various points on exactly where the crime occurred. And we've seen both ways, where some people actually have the actual location, or they'll aggregate for a certain area, a certain geography, like a neighborhood, and say there's been 10 breaking and enterings. Or some places decide they don't want to have that information on the internet at all, that you need to come to the police department.
What?
Or the sheriff's department.
Well, years.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What I'm in the newspaper, there's, in the 1800 block of 20th Avenue, that kind of thing. But really where I'm looking at this is perhaps with a neighborhood crime watch or something along those lines, after the hours of 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. is, exactly what you're talking about, just making as much of this information available to the public so that they can truly, have a quality of life enhancement for those.
With the neighborhood crime watch, it's been a very popular
Yes.
way of actually showing that, because a lot of times we'll sit there and discuss issues and not really know what the problems are. But if we can take those maps out to the community when we have those neighborhood meetings and be able to show that, then it really starts to make, give it so much more value.
Yeah, this is powerful.
Well, one of our focuses when we started the strategic plan was to, again, I come back to the return on investment. And when you're able to enable citizens and you're able to offer each department a tool that will improve efficiency and productivity, which it's well documented it does, the next phase is to convince the commissioners that this is the tool to invest in. What we're seeing is a trend throughout the United States where there's massive investments made in geospatial technologies. Because remember, we're talking GIS, but we're also talking GPS. And when you talk about GPS, the global positioning tools, I mean, the reason we have GPS is to populate a geographic information system of that software. But when you talk about GPS, we're talking about AVL, and now we're talking about automobile vehicle location, automatic vehicle location. In a sense, we're attaching now tools to police officers' belts, to vehicles, to track where they are in real time. And we're not really far away. I'm doing some work overseas really where you can attach something to a police officer's belt where we can track where he is or she is and monitor the welfare of that police officer, of that, the sheriff. So we're that close to this technology, and this is one step towards that, because the investment we're going to talk about now is the investment in building the infrastructure so we can use those tools. And you'll see some numbers which total just less than $2 million. Is a major investment in getting to those tools. And let me talk about, I know you have some more questions and we'll be here for a while, but year one, the investment is at $801,000. And our recommendations do include the intranet, it does include data conversion. There's a massive amount of data conversion and creation. I can't quite see my notes here, but there are public kiosks involved in that. So this is just a summary of year one. In year two, we're recommending that we move to a phase where we continue after the design. Actually, I should say year one there's a lot of design of the physical database and the logical database, and there's a large amount of data creation. In year two, we're starting to use all of that data, but we're continuing to build all that digital data as well, continue to build digital data. And then we're starting to use handheld GIS units and start looking at, in year three, more of the software solutions as well. So typically, and this is fairly typical, where in year one there's an investment in building the data. In year two we're continuing building the data, but we're starting to use the technology. And in year three we really go enterprise-wide, and we start to see some of the most advanced uses of GIS throughout the county and throughout the departments. One thing I'll finish on, and actually you'll notice that in year three it was 456,000. Our strategic plans usually the numbers drop off. Now I'm not going to kid you, it's not a one-time investment in GIS. There's going to be ongoing commitment and ongoing investments. It goes from 800,000 to 700,000 to 450,000. But the years on, we will need to reevaluate where the county is and continue building on that. There will not be the upfront costs as you see in year one, because we will have built it. There'll be more costs associated with technology and the use and the application of GIS. 10 minutes to go. And I apologize if I covered a lot of territory in 10 minutes. There is the strategic plan. I'm hoping you have it in your hands. I know you have an executive summary on that. What I've done today, what I've tried to do today, is just give you an overview of what our intentions are and our recommendations.
Thank you very much. Questions, I'm sure.
Sounds great.
That is. I mean,
No
it's
question?
Yeah.
Gary?
I think, I like all the information. I know the federal government's got a lot of this and have had for years with some of their tracking stations do with drug import and so on and so forth. But I think the devil's in the details here when this is laid out, how much information is going to be available to the public through law enforcement. And so there's probably going to be some considerable dialogue about, what we want to collect and how we want to distribute it. But my biggest thing is this includes the software and the operational hardware and so on and so forth, or to run this system when you provide all the information we need?
Yes, you hit the nail on the head. Everything you see now is the price of year one, let's say. It doesn't include the devil is in the detail issues. That would be working with the attorney. That would be working with you and working with the key steering committee to talk about data standards, to talk about how much information should be available to the public, and to talk about the governance of GIS. Because as we get into GIS here at the county, we have to be very careful with how it's managed, how it's maintained, because it would be a pure waste of time to spend nearly $1 million in year one and then not have some infrastructure in place to maintain and manage it. Mm-hmm. And that's a coordination issue. And there are some key ingredients to this that we'll keep our eye on as we move forward in year one. And that is the management, coordination, and the training and education. Some of those key factors we will be monitoring as we go through, as we move into year one.
Well, it's like building a bridge or a road or anything else. It's, you've got to have the ongoing maintenance. And the other thing is, just out of curiosity, for instance, you mentioned affordable housing neighborhoods and stuff of that nature. How do you collect that information? I know how you enter it and how it'll be available and all that, but how do you actually go in and collect and say, these areas are affordable housing and these areas aren't, when you get into the economics of that and trying to make that decision?
Yeah, the GIS is a tool where all of the departments will have the flexibility to use their expertise to add information to it. So what we're saying here is we're building the foundation. Each department can say, well, I want to now create a layer of affordable housing, and that would be in a certain department, planning, I'm not sure. And essentially, they would have the tool, they would have the foundation to create that fairly easily, and it will be using their professional skills to determine that. I'm certainly not going to tell you how they do that.
And I'll answer that a little bit, because I was a GIS coordinator in the city county government. What we did a lot, we pulled, various economic data layers, the tax assessment value, the real estate value, what was the last time it was sold, how much did it cost. You can kind of, once you start getting that, then you can start pulling that out, shading the maps a different way, taking a look at it, working with the planners and all that to take a really good, hard look at where that's going.
Yeah, I know right now it's absolutely mind-boggling, the information that's available just on the internet. Mm-hmm. I can put an address in Podunk, Pennsylvania.
It's a nice place.
In a lot of cases, bring it right down and have an aerial view of the block the house is sitting at. I mean, it's amazing the information that's available. But I think the idea is good, and I think from operation of government across the board, something like this is very valuable.
I think agree with you on that. Is this in addition to David Nolte's office, or this is ours, or how does this coordinate?
We're going to coordinate with, I think the first key to us is accuracy, because we're going to try and put all our infrastructure that's in the ground, under the ground. We're going to know what's there. And accuracy is our first thing that we'll work on. It's very important. We don't have a central database that someone can pull up and know where our water lines, our electric lines, where our right-of-way, public right-of-way, and all that. When you talk about affordable housing, too, you talk about being eligible for Farmers Home Administration. Is the water line nearby? Are there paved streets? Because you have to have paved streets, water, and sewer to be Farmers Home eligible on big projects. How far is it away? Things like that, demographic, zoning. And so we've got a lot of work ahead of us, and what we're going to do is, it's very important to our infrastructure database. It's going to bring it all into one so that we can share information. People can look at it. I think that's what its biggest attribute is.
For instance, if the county wants to go out and dig a trench, you're going to know whether there's phone cables or electrical lines or water, sewer. All that will be a part of the data also.
Right now, it'll be we'll know what we control, which will be, the roads, water, and sewer lines, and we'll try and get other information in there as time goes on. But right now, we're going to work on what we control first, and then try and get the other information.
And one thing we talk about in the document is working with those external entities like the phone company, electric. A lot of times, electric, gas, you can get that information. They have a real big vested interest in it. However, a lot of times getting data from the phone company,
So this is separate, this will be ours.
right, but that's the data they probably already have. So when you start building data too, it gives you a little bit of leverage because they want to know when they dig where your pipes are. So once you have it, you can say, well, we've got this data, can we, maybe swap, that kind of thing.
I think a portion I liked about this too, and correct me if I'm wrong, the sharing portion. I noticed St. Lucie County you had as an example. Are they on this system? Are they moving towards this system?
They are.
Yeah. So that would give us an opportunity to share with St. Lucie County as to what they're doing in their county and what we're doing.
Well, that's a good point, because one of the things we can't miss off is we talked about federal data. There's federal data. There's state data coming in, potential LIDAR data, which is fantastic data. There's intergovernmental agreements, we call it. That's agreements with other counties and any other organizations that as data sharing agreement could benefit the county. So we'll be looking at all of that, and that hits to the coordination issue. That's why we can throw this amount of money at it for hardware, software, but there's significant amount of management and commitment to it from that area as well.
We are somewhat into GIS info at present, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, but we're behind.
But they're gonna integrate ours, or it's a whole new system, or what are you gonna do?
We're integrating. What you already have is a good investment. You've got the software that we want, that family of software we'll stick with and kind of bring everything together into one application, and really your existing IT investments as well, pulling data from that.
So are we accurate?
Well, that's a key to this is survey accuracy, and that's why we're going to our survey department is going to be very involved in this. We're going to have to spend a lot of time making sure everything's accurate that we input, because it's a case of garbage in, garbage out type situation. So our survey department will be very involved in this, and we're going to try and find a very good accuracy. So that's very important to setting up your initial database, is the accuracy of what's in the ground.
And when we share and receive other information from others, how can we evaluate how accurate that information is?
Well, that's a great point, actually, which I didn't think we'd get to today, but there's something called metadata, which is data standards. And the reason we have to do this now is because there's an awful lot of need to go out and create GIS data from all the departments, but we need to manage that and corral all of that and make sure any data we get in from outside organizations, we know the origin of the data. Now, metadata is just a file that says this is when it was created, this is the accuracy of it, this is the person who created it. Now, when it comes to monitoring and managing GIS, that's absolutely critical. When it comes to Homeland Security, that's absolutely critical as well. Because in case of an emergency, the metadata standards can be given to any federal organization, and they automatically create the GIS for use in some kind of disaster. So metadata is your answer, and GIS coordination is part of the answer as well. So yes, we're on that.
Did we budget for that?
Yes, actually we've put all this in next year's budget. Actually, we're a little behind compared to most counties, and we need to catch up. And this is going to take a long-term commitment. We've put it in the budget. Dory Roy oversaw the project for me and coordinated it. She's got a lot more computer knowledge than I do, so and she did a great job doing this. And we definitely need to move in the future with this.
You want
recommendation?
Want a motion to include approving this program plus a work order? What's with the work order?
That's for their continuing services through the end of the year. We're going to hire people, but I would like them to be involved in helping coordinate when we hire and make sure we're moving in the right direction.
Okay.
I think it's
Motion include
42,000.
everything?
Yes.
Okay.
Recommendation.
We have a motion. Did I hear a second?
Yes.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Carl? Kurt? No? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Incredible.
Where are we? Item 10B, August commission meetings. Okay, item 10C.
No. You had asked staff to look in canceling some meetings in August. We've looked at it. We feel that we can do that. And it's up to the board. You can cancel them all the way to the 22nd. We would like that if we do that we draft a document. There's a few areas that we may have concern, like letters of credit, and give us a temporary where the county administrator and the county attorney have to sign off to release letters of credit or anything like that on behalf of the commission. We may have to draft a document for you just in case there's any emergencies, but just for that short time period. But otherwise, we think there wouldn't be a problem of, doing this and not having a meeting, and it's up to the board, but staff feels.
I'll move.
Second.
Moved and seconded that we cancel all meetings in September except the 22nd. All in favor, say aye.
Did you say September or August?
August.
August. Did I say?
Okay, so you're trying to.
August. Did I not say August? I'm
Giving you
sorry.
more time to campaign,
August the
Tom.
22nd. Trying
Can
to
I
get
just
another vacation going.
Can I clarify also, the only time there might be a meeting is if there was a hurricane. There are an emergency, so don't forget hurricanes, we'd have to call.
We evacuate,
Any kind of
don't we?
emergency would create that.
No, we don't
That goes
evacuate.
without saying.
You mean, if we had an emergency, I have to come back?
Well, you wouldn't, but
Neither would you.
that's right, we'll leave it up to Tom and.
Yeah, gee, thanks.
Let the Fellsmere people stand in for us. All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion
Aye.
carries. Oh, what'd you vote? Where did you come
Is that a
in?
late yay or that really no?
I'm the guy that's answered the meetings we cancel in the past. Now, we agreed with you.
Which meeting?
Which way did you
Oh,
vote?
back when you wanted to go to Washington on vacation.
4-1.
Yeah. I'm not do that.
Wesley's going to be in town for the whole time. He'll be in charge.
I will.
I'm gonna change mine to no. I'm gonna be in town anyway. Why don't we just poll?
Be
Why don't we just poll the
consistent, it should be
council? He's gonna be
3-2.
gone in August. Can we do that?
Do what?
Can we poll the council? See who's gonna be gone in August.
All right.
have to stay home. You have an appointment.
Yes, I do.
We're down to item 11C1, approval of final GMP for the new County Emergency Operations Center. Presentation? Mr. Bloom.
Morning, Steve Bloom, Project Manager. Just very briefly want to go over a few of the details of the project. We are here with the GMP, the Guaranteed Maximum Price for the new Emergency Operations Center. And we've been working on this, since the decision was made in Tallahassee to present us with a $2.5 million grant to help us fund a freestanding EOC. And of course, along with that came certain requirements like extra strength and extra survivability, such as 200-mile-an-hour winds, 72-hour power, and all of that, and certain elevation of the building. So anyway, since that time, Donati and Associates and Turner Construction, we've been working together to arrive at a design and a guaranteed maximum price, and we have done that. First of all, I would like to just briefly put some slides on the Elmo here. You won't be able to see this extremely well, but I must tell you that the boards, the full-size boards, are now hanging in the hallway in the same location as the interior design boards were for the administration building, so you can get a closer look. Okay, very briefly, this is the site plan. Can't see that. Very briefly, the 43rd Avenue runs along the bottom. You got north on this side of the screen. On this side of on the corner of 41st Street and 43rd Avenue is the new utilities complex. Over here is the nearly or approaching finishing of the administration subcomplex, and then right in the middle is the EOC. It's a self-contained site. It's about 11 acres. The building is about 16,000 square feet with some expansion space, some room for training, a communications tower, and what we call an antenna farm for the dish farm. And the site is surrounded by fence, and then at each entrance location we have an electronic card access for security. And this building is designed mainly for the emergency situation, of course. It will, however, be the day-to-day offices of the emergency management, emergency service department. Now the floor plan. Very briefly here, you can probably see these more easily out in the hallway. This is the main multi-purpose room where all the action takes place in the time of emergency. The brown rooms are called ESFs, Emergency Service Functions, and that is broken down between everything from the National Guard to the state to FEMA to Public Works and all that, so that they can come in and out.
What are the dimensions of the multipurpose room?
I can't tell you offhand, except that I believe it's about 2,000 square feet.
What's the size of the one that we have right now?
About 1,000.
Okay.
All right. The other rooms, the sort of mustard-colored rooms are the day-to-day offices, and then the green rooms are the computer communications, video function rooms there. So it's all very very secure. You'll see on the elevations here that it is a bit like a bunker.
It is a bunker.
And that's for a reason. For example, there's only 3 windows in the whole building. These areas are features. They're actually concrete. The whole building is tilled-up concrete construction. These features are doors that are shielded by a tilled-up panel out in front of it, and so that keeps wind impact from creating problems with the doors. And it's a very straightforward building, and we think the team has done a good job on this. So with that, if there are questions,
I have one.
That would be fine.
Go ahead. With this, just like all the new buildings that we're putting up, I know in the past, for instance, the sheriff's office and some other buildings that, I think even this building, but a problem with mold because of it being so airtight and everything else. I haven't kept up with it over the past several years, but have they done anything to alleviate that problem with the new construction, with mold getting in between the walls and so on and so forth?
There's a lot of air movement, a lot of outside air movement to keep the air fresh inside, even during a storm situation. In fact, the louvers through the outside wall are shielded by a wall out there to make sure that they stay in operation. And so I think air quality and mold should definitely not be a problem with this. The price, the guaranteed maximum price I did not mention, is $4,974,710 as presented by Turner Construction, and they are ready to go just about as soon as we shoot them the notice to proceed, and the construction time is 11 months.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
This might be a Joe Baird question. Joe, we got $2 million from the state?
2.5.
2.5.
$2.5 million.
May want to see if we, I heard in this year's budget, St. Lucie County got 75% matching funding. We may be able to go back and see if we can't readdress and not just St. Lucie County, but other communities got 75% matching funding for standalone EOCs. Might be something worth pursuing this next legislative session to see if we can't, because we were about a year ahead of them.
Yes.
Because of we were at the time, of course, putting this inside of our administration building.
Right.
I've already contacted the state representatives about that.
Good.
Okay. Steve, what kind of roof is going to be on this?
It's actually, it's a flat roof, build-up roof, specially bonded, and it is a concrete deck over steel joists.
Got it.
And it's fairly hefty, I might add.
Yep. Okay.
All right. Any further questions, staff? We have a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion. We have a second. I'll second. All in favor of staff recommendation signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Just for information, did we own the property?
Do we own the property?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Did we own the property, or did we have to?
Yes, we
Yeah,
did.
we did. I thought we did.
A long time.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
11I. Public Works, property acquisition at 7295 66th Avenue for the 66th Avenue widening and improvements, county project number 0417. Joseph and Ruby Roddenberry, owners.
Move approval.
I'll second that.
And moving second, under discussion. Tom?
And I know this is probably going to be one of many that are going to come before us. And my My question at this point in time, I don't know if it should be brought up now, would be brought up as more and more of these properties come before us for 66. But I wouldn't mind looking into the possibility of having these residents transfer their Save Our Homes, if they have it on this property, to where they go. Now, I know the other night at a meeting, Representative Popple made a comment, he thought we could do that at the county level. And I'm not sure, so maybe if we can direct staff, if it's the wish of the board.
By all means.
To definitely look into that for these residents that we're going to have to come in and begin to take.
We'll look
Fair
and,
market value.
we'll definitely look and see if we can do that legally. If we can, we will, because it'll help people feel more comfortable with us taking their property, so we'll definitely look at that.
That'd be the wish of the commission.
Yep.
Yes, I think
Yeah.
that would be good, because you don't want them to lose.
Correct.
That's, yes, I mean, they could have a tax bill larger than their house payment, quite possibly, and so, very, very good thinking there, Commissioner.
Very probably, if they've been there 40 years or so.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That amazed me because I asked that question of Popple when he was there, and it came up this year in the legislature, and the legislature didn't pass it. And I'm surprised that they wouldn't for, eminent domain type things or.
I think the cities were, municipalities were opposed to it.
In type things, I mean, that I wouldn't want to force to eminent domain to do that.
No, but I mean, when it's used for public purpose, and I mean real public purpose, like roads and bridges and so on and so forth, not for new shopping plazas or.
I think didn't he make the comment that he thought that could be done at the county level?
He did say that.
Yeah.
But I'd like to, I agree, we should look into that.
We will look into it, but all these tax issues are mandated at the state level.
Right.
We don't have a lot of discretion, but we'll look into it.
As looking into it, I mean, show us how. Whether if it's here or state,
not
just
just
show us
saying
how.
we can't do it. Let's see how we can do it if that be the case.
That's it.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Item 11J1, approval of a bid award and sample agreement for IRC bid number 2006074.
Did you take a vote on
we
that
vote on
last
that?
item?
Yeah,
Did we vote? Okay. I didn't realize we voted on it.
we did.
Okay.
There's some discussion after the fact. Okay.
We voted on it, though.
Yeah.
It would be 5-0 if we didn't already, but okay.
We voted on it.
I'm good.
Trust
Chairman
Are we
says,
going to be safe?
why do we want to be safe?
You don't all
Rerun
have
the
senior
tape.
moments.
Now, where was I?
Public Works. No, we did.
Approval of bid award and sample agreement for IRC bid number 2006074, Lakewood Terrace subdivision water assessment project.
Move staff recommendation.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Item 11J2, US 1 at Reflections Conflict Resolutions with FDOT Drainage.
Move staff
Pavement and traffic signal improvements. Work authorization directive number 2005-025.
Move staff recommendation.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Number 3, Billy's Auto Water Main Extension on 43rd Avenue from Southern Plumbing to 40th Street. Work authorization directive number 2005-026.
Move approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Number 4, Winter Beach Park Subdivision Petition Water Service, 52nd Avenue north of 65th Street, in Ural County Project Number UCP 2633, Preliminary Assessment Resolution 1 and 2.
Move to approve.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Under Commissioner items, anything? I have nothing. Gary Wheeler? Anything?
No.
Sandra?
No.
Leslie?
Just real quick, Commissioners, I'm going to Tallahassee on Thursday, or actually,
Why?
Oh, boy.
to go
Why? We
work
better vote on
yeah.
that.
No, I got a blanket authorization.
But you have to tell us why.
I am.
Take
I
your
am. In
blanket
fact,
with
I've got the backup. We're going to be on the agenda for the alignment of 101st with 102nd, actually 102nd Terrace with 101st Avenue.
Who are you seeing?
And it's going before the Acquisition and Restoration Council. We are item number 13. That's the backup.
Lucky number.
It is, I know. It appears really at this point from what I'm starting to hear is that the issue of lining up the road is not going to be difficult. We do have some issues that will have to be resolved with the retention pond necessary for retention on the Phase 4 of County Road 512. Again, I will be heading up there. Staff is going, but not at my request.
Who is this group?
I really don't know who they are. I'll tell you whenever I get to look at them.
Acquisition and Restoration Council.
Yes. Yep, I don't know who it is, but staff is going, Chris Kafer and Roland Du Bois will be going. And their main issue is because it's dealing with the buffer preserve and it's dealing with the Phase 4 of County Road 512 retention pond issue. That's why they're heading.
Can we request them to speak?
Absolutely, absolutely.
No, I'm just teasing. I know you've been doing a lot of work on that.
I just wanted to bring everybody up to speed on it, though. I just got this email the other day and wanted to forward it to you. And if you have any questions, I'd say, well, we can't very well talk about it, so right now is the time to talk about it if you have any questions. Sure.
Wesley's going to Tallahassee. I'd like to open the public hearing.
Commissioner Wheeler, any comment?
Your turn? No?
No, you already asked me.
Already asked you. Okay.
Yeah, we got down to Wesley. Yeah,
Loud.
don't ask him again.
No, don't ask him.
No,
Tom,
sir.
you have anything? Under item 14, special districts and boards. 14B is solid waste disposal district, approval of minutes of meeting of May 16th, 2006.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. B2, engineering services for design and permitting of a Class 1 landfill cell.
Move approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor
I
say
wonder
aye.
if we move the public hearings to the end of the agenda if we get more 5-0 votes.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.